it's your kuleana, it's your responsibility to prepare yourself for that and to, help the conversation along, the dialogue along without like shutting down or without making the other person feel like they shouldn't have corrected you.
Welcome to Unpack, Culture Chronicles. I'm Danielle Marshall, an equity strategist and executive coach. This podcast explores cultural differences, similarities, and how curiosity can help us bridge them through meaningful conversations and practical strategies for connection. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Melissa Miura, a leadership coach with a passion for regenerative and sustainable practices that honor people and the planet. In this episode, Melissa shares how her upbringing in Hawaii and her global experiences have shaped her views on curiosity, cultural connection, and navigating complex relationships with grace. From redefining professional norms to embracing the aloha spirit, her insights will leave you inspired to approach differences with curiosity and care. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Melissa, you and I met about a year ago, and I've been wanting to have this conversation with you because what struck me immediately about you is sort of this quiet curiosity that you bring to every interaction that we've had. And your style of, I think, both question asking and internalizing the new information just made you somebody that I wanted to stay connected to like instantaneously. And so today I'm really excited to hear more about your thoughts on curiosity and how that applies as you're thinking about different cultural groups and so forth. But before we get started, I wanted to invite you to share maybe a little bit more about yourself and why curiosity is important to you.
Yeah, so I am a coach to sustainability and social impact professionals, working with them on business and leadership coaching that is in alignment with regenerative and sustainable practices. So in a world where we ideally are giving back more than we are extracting in the ways that we move through the world and are able to sustain and even help life thrive. So that's what I'm really passionate about. And in curiosity for me, thinking a lot about how can I help somebody else see something and better understand them through questions rather than coming in with assumptions or with mandates, anything that I think we sort of get to know more about each other when we are curious, and we get to actually have more productive results when we guide through questioning, I think.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate that. Certainly, we're in a space right now where I don't think there are enough questions being asked. Like a lot of people are just coming to the table, to your point, with like assumptions, and it's just assumed as truth without doing that deeper dive. And, even as you talk about sustainability, I'm like, I have so many questions and I'm so curious about that because what's sustainable to one person may not be sustainable to the next or a given community. And so like, even what does that look like? So I'm sure that there's a lot of ways that you get to apply the curiosity, like in your day-to-day work, personally and through your work life. So let's jump in because I want to ask you a few questions here today. When you think about asking questions and letting things emerge in particular, like how does that shape the way that you navigate maybe personal or professional relationships?
I think it's everything about the way I navigate and, start relationships with people professionally or personally. I always try to understand where someone's motivations are coming from, especially if they approach me, for business purposes. And I think I've learned through my own sort of mistakes or trial and error of how to market myself, how to sell my own services, of what feels good and what feels authentic to me versus like what can feel like there's a agenda or there's something like pushy there that's not really coming from like a great place. So I think questions rather than like, if I'm going out to somebody and asking more questions about like, oh, what's important to them or like, what do they need right now? How could I help connect them to somebody, or what can I think of that might be useful to them, rather than like, I had to, unlearn a lot of the traditional marketing and selling things in the beginning of my business of like, ask questions for the purpose of being able to sell somebody something versus asking questions, truly understanding, do they even need my services? Are we a maybe, good fit for this? Or is there something else I can think of that would help them and, help this relationship in a different way, and all that other kind of stuff can come later? Or, we just want to build relationships for that sake of building that network. So yeah, I think there's a way to ask questions too that is more staying true to what you want out of a relationship in terms of it being authentic and long term versus short term, kind of like, what can I get out of this?
Yeah. So it sounds like, and I think we're aligned a little bit in this way of thinking, that you are asking questions without agenda in this case, right? Like, or maybe I shouldn't even say that, because I think there's always an agenda that people have, but it sounds like your agenda may be the relationship itself.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the sale. It's not the I'm pitching you something, but like, tell me a little bit more about yourself and I will see where I might be able to support you. Does that feel right for you?
Yeah, exactly. I think, it's definitely the where I might be able to support you. Like, I want to learn how I can fit into your world and add something of value to it, and vice versa. I would like appreciate that, but I don't never like expect that from somebody.
Sure. Absolutely. It naturally evolves on its own. Yeah. And so one of the other things I was thinking about, Melissa, when we've been talking for a while, and I've gotten to know a little bit about your background, and you are from Hawaii. And we talked a little bit about the culture there, and you've educated me on a couple of things, but I want to sort of ask this so the audience can have an opportunity to hear in your own voice. But when you think about sort of Hawaiian culture, it's really diverse. It's very layered. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective what curiosity means to you, like as you explore both your own culture and others' cultures in that setting.
Yeah. So I think this is funny because it sort of takes me back to like when we first met. And I think you had said something like Hawaiian in reference to like me, maybe, or like, the identity of like being from Hawaii. And I was just like, oh, it's, if you say Hawaiian, you're talking about native Hawaiian people versus I am from Hawaii. So it's not the same. And you're like, oh, thank you. I just like really appreciated your response at that time too, because to me it wasn't any big deal, but I could see that you were like sincerely taking this moment to like ingest that information and just like appreciate that you'd been corrected. And it was such a little thing usually that I, tell people, and it's like, oh, okay, whatever, and just brush past it. But I appreciated that you were like, wow, this is new information and I want to know more about this. But yeah, in the same way, I would say like Hawaiian culture would refer to like native Hawaiian culture. And if you're talking about just broadly like the culture in Hawaii, that's kind of just been my whole childhood, is like, what is my culture versus like there are so many mixed cultures. It just always felt like it's just a part of being here is kind of growing up in other cultures that aren't necessarily part of your own ethnic background or identity, but do shape you in a lot of ways. We share lots of food. We share like language things, lots of different kind of practices within our homes. There's a lot of Japanese, Chinese, there's Native Hawaiian, there's Tongan, Samoan, there's, all these different cultures. So I think there's like a certain freedom that I grew up with of like being able to be like, oh, what are you? For example, like, what is your ethnic background is what, we mean. But you would just say like, oh, what are you? Or like there was a lot of, and there still is actually like a lot of not very like politically correct, just kind of like stereotyping or joking a lot of times that maybe to people from the continent would seem not okay to do. And then there's different dynamics perhaps that play into that, but like here is very much still a part of just the way that people relate to each other and people kind of become closer to each other. Like, I don't even want to repeat some things, but like, we just have like pidgin ways of talking about people. So like Portuguese, Portuguese, like Japanese, Japanese. There's different like, I don't know, interesting and fun things that come out of having so many different cultures and people here. And in this sort of newer age of, trying to be more sensitive and politically correct, sometimes I think there's different ways that can like conflict.
Sure. So a little bit of tension, but even in what you
Yeah.
explained, like there's some nuances because I have had multiple conversations with people here on the mainland who they just dislike immensely. And I understand their thinking behind this. When people come up to them and they say, where are you from? Because often on the mainland, when that question is asked of people, it is not because they want to know where they're from. It's almost a sense of othering people in that moment.
Right.
Like, well, clearly you can't be from the US. So you have to be an immigrant, therefore, where are you from? But what I'm hearing you say is like it's such a natural part of the culture there, like that you literally do want to know where people ethnically may be from because of the potpourri, which is Hawaii.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's so many different things. So like I remember as a kid wishing I was more ethnicities because it was almost like a game. Like you go out to your friends and you're like, "Oh, what are you?" And they're like maybe like 7 things. And I'm like, I wish I was more." Like we have so many cool different things in our background, you know? So it's almost like a contest sometimes. And then I know my friends who are like, full like Japanese or like full, Chinese or something like that, or maybe like half. They're like, "Oh, I wish I was more things." So it's just like kind of like a fun thing rather than like, trying to figure out like, do you belong here or not? Because we all, belonged in some ways, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful way to view it also is that we do all belong here. And so the differences are not necessarily something to divide us in that moment, but there's something that you got excited about. You wanted to know more about sort of your friends, your colleagues, etc. And it's something that I wish that we would embody more on the mainland because I don't necessarily think differences are bad. They're simply just different. Um,
Hmm.
you had shared a little bit with me earlier about the aloha spirit, and I wonder if you would speak to that and tell me just how that applies to the different things that you're doing every day and like how you interact with folks.
Yeah. So I it's kind of interesting to talk about the Aloha spirit because it's been so, so, so commodified and like so many things about Hawaii, that are deeply rooted in Hawaiian culture have been commodified in the way where it's like I have to roll my eyes a little bit because sometimes, we get like it's not a very nice sounding word, but I don't know, like we get visitors or we get like transplants who like come and move here and they're like, "Oh, like everything's great and like aloha spirit, like people should be welcoming, blah, blah, blah." But then it's kind of that shallow level or that surface level where maybe there's some entitlement there versus like to me, aloha spirit, like growing up here is just like all the ways in which you like see your neighbors, you take care of your neighbors, your elderly, your kupuna, like you're, making sure that you like slow, like I think about this in driving all the time. You're making sure that you slow down for pedestrians. We do that a little bit more here than maybe some places on the continent. Like you actually do it and then you like shaka or you wave when, somebody gives you the right of way or somebody passes you and, just little things like that where you're constantly kind of acknowledging and taking care of the relationships you have with people who, are around you in your community. I just remember like different things like my grandparents and my great grandparents had actually, sorry, my great grandparents and my great great grandparents had like stores or general stores and things where, people in the community, if they were having a hard time, like they would just give them what they needed and they didn't ask for anything back and they didn't keep records of like, you need to pay me back at this time. Like that was just something that they did. And like my dad talking about when he was younger, like Native Hawaiian, spear divers, fishermen, people like that, teaching him the ways of like how to look for fish or when to spot the waters and what was, good to do, what was not good to do, learning the ways of, how to be pono, how to be like right and, respectful of the land, the water.
Mhm.
So kind of those things of just being caring for, yourself the land, each other. It's like everything is connected. And I just think about that a lot because as we, have more Hawaiian people, as we have more local people who are no longer able to afford to live here and have to live outside of Hawaii, there's now, more Native Hawaiians outside of Hawaii than there are within Hawaii. It's just something that I think about a lot that's like feels like it's under threat sometimes. Also because of, the larger political, spectrum of things that's going on and world events. So I always try to just like remember to do that and to keep on, trying to just be in a way that's, I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, but be in a way that's honoring that sort of aloha spirit. I think that's so key to being here, but can often just kind of be forgotten or like glazed over.
Yeah. And so it sounds like there's a heavy focus on like the collective on the Hawaiian Islands, and just being able to make sure that goodwill is there, that we're taking care of our neighbors. And that brings up another question for me as I think about it. Like, when you think about like leading with grace and goodwill and that collective spirit in mind, have you seen that impact maybe like challenging situations that you've had? Like, how do you use that as a tool to bridge across difference?
I think for me, it's not trying to be like reactive to things and really understand that people can be going through so many other things and you might not have control. To give like a more concrete example, maybe, I guess in professional situations where, where I've had people who are clearly trying to get something from me or really sell hard. I think other people I know would have like shut it down or would have, not been receptive to that. And that's, they're right. But to me, I was always tried to be a little bit more graceful because I feel like I kind of was taught bad, practices in terms of how to approach people in business first. So I know what it's like to go through that process of unlearning that and just coming back to like a normal human being sort of relationship. So I would get approached sometimes for services or whatever. And I would usually try to take the time to either write back to a person, or if it was like on a call, just like let them know that, hey, this isn't usually how I like to be approached. And I totally understand this might be where you're coming from, but I've kind of shifted my own practices to get to know people first before I try to understand where we might be able to work together, that kind of stuff. And sometimes people don't respond. And sometimes people do like reply that they really appreciate that feedback and they hadn't really thought about, the way that they were going out to people as being aggressive or, pushy or whatever. So I think trying to have a little bit of grace and understanding for where people might be coming from, especially when they've taken some amount of like courage to put themselves out there, maybe. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, because I'm hearing you like touch on a couple of things right here. Like, one, in a very quiet, spoken way, as you tend to be, you have challenged a cultural norm of you have to be a hard sell. You have to jump in front of people and like buy now, 1-day sale only, kind of that mentality. And you've said that that's actually not my norm and that doesn't work for me. But what I'm also hearing is because several people have now done that. And I've seen it particularly in the last, I would say even 4 to 5 years, like I've seen a lot of people push back against dominant culture. But what I've heard you say in this moment is I'm still extending grace, right? I can give you this feedback and I can also hold space for you to not understand where I'm coming from until I've at least told you. Right?
Yeah.
So something else that I wanted to really be able to talk to you about is you had mentioned that you spent some time in Hawaii growing up, but you also came to the mainland or excuse me, and I'm going to correct myself here because we're not calling it mainland, and I'm going to let you talk about that in a second. We're calling it the continent. But you had spent some time in Hawaii and then came back to the continent here. But your experience as an Asian American looked different in both places. Would you speak to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, like even when you say Asian American, I'm like, I'm not an Asian American.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was my experience when I went to college in Maine, like one of the whitest states in the US. And, I was sort of lumped in all of a sudden or told, oh, I should join that Asian American students group or whatever. Like even, Asian American friends would be like, oh, you're Asian American. And I'm like, I really honestly never thought of myself as that. Like they feel like separate things. Like I'm technically American, like family wise, my grandfather really wanted to serve in World War II and was really mad that he was not able to make the height cut, even though a friend who was shorter did, and he thought they were racist for not allowing him in. Anyways, he still got to go as a dentist, I think. And he, had his American flag. So that was something in our family where he was like very proud that he got his American flag after his service. And at the same time, his father was interned during the war. So different things like that, where I had a complicated relationship already, maybe to that idea. And then, of course, getting older and really understanding how the US came to illegally take over Hawaii, that complicated things further. But identity wise, growing up, I didn't think of myself as Asian American. I thought of myself as all the separate things, the ethnic identities that I am. So Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Howling, unknown Caucasian. But my, grandfather was adopted from a Jewish orphanage. So maybe somewhere in, Austria, Germany, something like that. And yeah, when I went to the continent and went to Maine and understood that I was being seen as now this Asian American, just like blank, like label, this overall thing, not like all the little things, that I thought of myself as. That was weird because I was like, I don't I don't identify with the same experiences that a lot of my Asian American friends on the continent have had, maybe of like, yeah, being in the minority and of, like rightly getting triggered by the question, like, where are you from? Or like, what are you? Because people were trying to, discern, like, do you belong here? Or like, can you really call yourself American? So I think, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Even now, I I don't really identify as Asian American. I think of it as a separate experience because I grew up in the majority here. Don't have those, I don't know. It's not fair for me to say, but at least a lot of my personal friends that I met that were Asian American had a lot of resentment towards white people in particular because of the ways that they were like bullied and othered growing up.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because even slip of the tongue right here, and I'd be the first person to say, like, I, as intentional as I am about using language, like we are going to make mistakes sometimes and or can potentially offend people when we're not intending to do so. And so I will say, along with the grace that you offer in so many situations, the fact that you're willing to be able to pause and gently correct someone and just say, well, actually, like that doesn't feel like my identity, is incredibly important. And yet I don't want to hold you or any other individual to correcting and teaching people in every situation. And so I personally accept that from you as a gift, of friendship and of goodwill. But, I wonder also, like now, since you don't identify like as an Asian American, like what do you say? Like when you have to tell somebody your identity, because you listed so many things that you are, comprised of, if you will.
Well, that's the thing is like, I never really have to tell anybody my identity and I want to because again, like growing up, I felt like it was more normal for people to just be like, oh, what are you? Or like it wasn't a thing. Whereas now when I meet people, especially again on like the continent, I feel like I can see the question in their eyes. They're like, want to know, but they don't want to ask because they don't want to offend or yeah, they don't know how to ask maybe. So a lot of times I just volunteer the information, but I don't, yeah, I never really say like, oh, I don't know, Asian American or anything like that. Or I just list the things that I am or talk a little bit about like the background of like how my family came to be, where they are from across the world and stuff like that. So yeah.
Mhm.
It's something I find that I have to volunteer more than I would ever be asked.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that too. And so we were talking just a moment ago about the difference between mainland and continent. What does the shift in language mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's new to me too. I think I've seen it most around like Hawaiian people and people who are more on like a outwardly like vocal decolonization journey in Hawaii. And so I've seen the shift of like language to from mainland to continent because Hawaii is our mainland. Like this is our, main home and place. So why are we referring to the US continent as the mainland as if like that's the place to like go to or return to? And I think that probably has to do too with some of the ways that migration has affected, culture and everything like that. It's like people leave Hawaii because they feel like there's nothing for them here to, build their professional paths or to raise their family maybe. And like sometimes they return, but it's getting harder and harder to do that. So I don't know. To me, I also hear that and I feel like it's a shift of like trying to take back. Like that is not the mainland where you go to once you're like grown up. Like you come back here. This is the mainland. But it's different and it's not like people think about that. It's not that deep for some people too. So like I tell my family about it and they're like, I'm just going to keep saying mainland because that's what we've always said and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to use that more too.
Yeah. I guess it also speaks to what you said, a little bit ago about like unlearning things, right? When we're socialized and raised using certain phrases and just ways of thinking, it does require us to be intentional, like, and to really sort of self-assess, like, what does this mean to me personally? Like, does this phrase still work for sort of how I'm viewing the world today? And if not, what am I going to adopt instead? So I appreciate you sharing that. And, the other thing that like surfaces for me is that you seem to be someone who's oriented around listening and observing before you ask questions, right? And that seems to like be part of your curiosity. Can you tell us a little bit more about like why that's important to you? And again, like how it influences your ability to learn and just navigate through the world?
Yeah, I think there's, again, like with the mix of cultures that we have here, a lot of Asian cultures and then Hawaiian culture, there's like this, you know, history of just for children or for anybody, there's a time and a place and there are structures. So you don't just like you as a sole individual, your voice does not take precedent over other people's, especially maybe elders or, you know, you have a time and place to speak, but it's usually when you're given permission and after you have yourself observed, listened, can in what you need to be able to speak. So I think growing up in, a sort of culturally dominant sort of Japanese household from my dad's side, and then in Hawaiian culture through like school and, outside activities, even like now when I'm like as an adult relearning hula and going to a halau, like a hula group, there's the reminder always that we don't start to dance or imitate or follow as soon as the kumu or somebody is going to demonstrate. You can't even like, put your hands up or try to imitate to try to learn. The way you learn is first just by watching. So you just watch and you listen. And then when, you get permission, then you can start to try yourself. But there's a time and a place. So I think with that in mind, I always just try to like take assessment of any situation or in a new environment because I've been lucky enough to be able to like live and travel around the world. I was like an au pair in Italy and I got to live and teach English in South Korea. So I've been able to do different things like that. And always, I think whenever I come into new cultural situations, I just want to absorb and understand what are the dynamics potentially at play here. Do my own research too before going to somebody to ask questions. Um, yeah, just be like respectful in that way, I think, of not like just barging in and trying to assert my own ideas or just say my opinions about things without knowing anything. I think also, yeah, having observed that maybe from this being such a over touristed place, you
Mhm.
don't want to be like that, those tourists. You don't want to be like those
Yeah.
visitors. Yeah.
I wonder for you because I'm observing something that's happened here on the continental states over the last couple of years where lots of people said that they wanted to sit in a listening posture. They wanted to observe other people before they join the conversation. And that has been taken both as an opportunity to listen and learn, but for some people, it has also been used as a way to, step back from the conversation. I don't really want to engage. And I wonder if you've been challenged for that practice at all. Like, not to say that there is anything at all wrong with it, but like, has anyone challenged you as to why you're not fully engaging?
Yeah, well, I don't know about so much in recent years, but throughout school, a lot of the times I remember getting on my report cards like, Melissa has such great insights to share when she speaks. We just wish she would do it more often. We wish
Mm,
she would contribute more often, all of those things. But I, you know, I feel like a lot of the times there's so much that you can get out of a conversation without actively participating in it. Maybe sometimes just this personally comes down to like my parents can be very talkative, like at parties or with their groups of friends. And so I never had a chance to speak a lot of times.
sure.
I didn't want to, but like felt like I could learn so much just by observing like how people would interject in a conversation or the ways that they would shift. And in addition to like what they were saying, but a lot of times I was just like always observing the ways that sort of different dynamics worked in a group. And I was getting a lot of out of that, even if I was never really speaking. So I think, in my professional life as like a coach and a guide, that serves me so much because I'm not talking all the time and like never learning about the other person. Like I'm letting people do a lot of the talking, asking questions here and there that just like spark more, conversations. So it's served in so many ways, and it allows people to understand their own mind and to hear their thoughts out loud. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's helped in a lot of ways, I think.
And I will say this, having been the beneficiary of some of the questions that you do happen to ask, your thoughtfulness and maybe sitting back and pausing and simply observing means that when you do ask questions, the things that you ask are really powerful. And I have found just over, the last couple of months, even like when you pose a question, I have to pause and I'm like, I need to think about that because I don't even have an answer. And those are some of my favorite questions. So I want to ask you one last thing related to what we've been discussing, sort of the step back and observe before you interact. Are you seeing a shift at all with younger generations, or is it holding true that that's still a deep part of the culture?
I can't say that I like interact that much with like younger generations than me. I can think of like maybe a year ago, I was called back to my old ballet studio to do like a performance, and it was back with the high schoolers there. And there was an incident actually of confrontation with an older generation, one of my teachers, and a younger, Gen Z high schooler, um, where I was like, personally, because of the way, I grew up and raised, I was like, I can't believe the younger one like challenged her or, spoke. I wouldn't say spoke back to her, but I wouldn't have done it. Like, and we would have known not to do it because
Yeah.
it's your teacher, and what they say, like you listen, you accept, and there is, I think, tension there maybe,
Yeah.
because and we talked about it a little bit afterwards, me and another teacher from the sort of same generation, but we talked about how maybe the younger Gen Z generation, they've been told a lot of like how they have this voice and they have more agency and they have these like personal rights and things that they should stand up for. And it is good to speak out. And yes, those things. And I know that other teacher was not coming from a place of like, I want to dominate you and like, what I say goes,
Mm,
period. but she was coming from this place of like understanding in her mind, like at her age, at her experience level, everything like that. There is a sort of different power dynamic, and she deserves a certain level of respect in the sense of like, if I say something, then you should maybe, yeah, again, like listen first and see if you can accept that rather than immediately like coming back and being like, well, this is my opinion or blah, blah, blah. So there can be, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Tension.
I'm seeing it every single day, and definitely in workplaces with the generational differences, and that's very much cultural as well. There's there's the way that people did it from whatever, if you were a boomer, if you are Gen Xer, etc. Like there are ways that we have grown up accustomed to speaking to people, norms that we have, and now the newer generations really are coming in empowered in a very different way to use their voices and to take basically their agency and just move differently throughout the world. And so I always wonder, what feels like is the stronger pull for people? Is it like the original culture, if you will? And as I say, original culture, like that's challenging even because culture continues to morph. All of our culture continue to morph. And so thank you for sharing that. Um, you know, something else that I guess I really wanted to make sure that we touched on in our time together is part of the reason that I started this podcast is that I noticed that people were really struggling with how to have conversations with people who have different social identities. Even if they have some of the same identities, they, something about this other person is slightly different. And so they're like, I don't know how to enter the conversation. And so I'm wondering if you have any tips or strategies for folks who want to engage in this work. Like, how do they stay curious and open?
I think trying to maybe put out in the open what you might be scared about is always helpful so that somebody else knows. If you do say something offensive, you didn't mean to, and you're addressing that up front. Maybe like you in the beginning of a question, right? You say something like, I'm so sorry, I really don't want to, ask something that's offensive, and if it is, like, please let me know. I will absolutely, course correct or whatever it is. Just like starting, a conversation like that so that the other person is like, okay, I get it. They have, maybe some apprehension around this. And I can also maybe prepare if they are going to have something offensive. But I've also been, yeah, they've also let me know that it's okay, right? To let them know. And it's not going to be like, hopefully they're not going to react in a negative way when they are corrected. And so then for you to also prepare yourself to, again, react gracefully if you come up against a correction or something you weren't expecting that maybe you might want to be defensive about. It's your kuleana, it's your responsibility to prepare yourself for that and to, help the conversation along, the dialogue along without like shutting down or without, making the other person feel like they shouldn't have corrected you,
Yeah. So there's some vulnerability in that to just simply be able to name things up front and just say like, hey, I'm just newly learning about whether it's your culture or, this artwork or whatever it is, right? I'm learning about something that is relevant to your community and I'm trying to tread lightly, but I'm still curious. I'd like to know more. But I think it's also interesting that you said that you have a responsibility, right? So like when someone is telling you, hey, Melissa, I'm just learning a little bit more about your culture, don't want to step on your toes here, that you're preparing yourself for whatever my response is in that moment. And like, what does responsibility and preparedness look like for you?
I think having, again, that sort of self-check of like, it's okay, you can't really control your internal response if you're going to be like, I don't like the way they said that, or like, something about it makes you want to be like, you're wrong, or whatever it is. Right. But it's your responsibility to check yourself, take a pause, ask yourself maybe like, why am I responding like this? Or how can I externalize in a way that's useful and that's, again, extending grace to both of us in this conversation. That's your responsibility to check how you respond to someone.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the pause. So many people are talking about that right now because It's the thing that allows us, if we can even take like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is, to step back for a second and just notice within our bodies what is surfacing, right? I'm feeling tense. I'm annoyed. Maybe I'm feeling really connected to the person, but like what about this dynamic is allowing that to be true? And how much control do we like as individuals have in that moment? So I'm going to ask this one final question related to interacting with different people, different cultural beliefs, et cetera. And this one is relevant, I think, to the day and age that we're living in. And I am wondering, like, when you encounter someone who has really strongly opposing beliefs or values, how do you stay connected in those conversations and open again to being curious?
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on the person and how open they are it's like, it's a two-way street. How open they are to actually having a conversation versus if they just want to, like, have their own billboard or like one-way echo chamber, and nothing you say is going to spark any curiosity in them. Because I think, it's a mistake always to go into a conversation being like, I want to change this person's mind. Or like, they need to see how I see things, and they just need the facts. Like, so oftentimes I feel like we've, come up against so many things in the last 5 years of like race, conversations, and also like climate change or, different sort of political things and conspiracies sometimes. But yeah, a lot of times the thing that we come up against is like, if they just understood the facts, these are the facts here, like, let me show you, and then you will think the same way that I do. But it's hard when you're not looking at the same facts and don't trust them. What is a fact is up for debate these days. And B, it's like anybody, whatever your views are, does not appreciate, being pushed or like being made to feel like somebody wants you to do something that, you were just over here with your own opinions or whatever, and now somebody's like trying to come in and like change things rather than, again, understanding from your perspective or just trying to be curious.
Yeah. So I hear two things again in what you just shared, because one is, I think, discernment and understanding that while you might embody openness and curiosity like as a value within yourself, it doesn't mean you always have to apply it to everyone, right? If you're running into people where it literally is that you're going to be locked in a battle because they're not willing to hear you, like maybe you do opt out. I don't have a problem with that at all, because I think this is also an opportunity for us to like focus on our own self-care and attending to our needs in that moment. But the other thing that I am hearing from what you just shared is you're trying to approach this without agenda, right? It's just like, I'm going to be curious. I'm still going to use discernment, but I'm not here to change your perspective, change your mind. It's simply, these are the things I am thinking.
Right. Yeah.
So Melissa, do you have anything coming up in your business that you want to share with our listeners? How can they get in touch with you?
I'm actually, I think, searching for ways, especially in this moment where it feels like there's so much urgency and I want to be in a place where I can have more systemic reach and impact. So I'm looking for, opportunities to get plugged into a larger like company or organization, networks where I can do some of the work that I've been doing on my own as a coach, but helping more, more connected, larger organizations with cultural shifts and transformations that need to happen so that we can, move in ways that are more regenerative and sustainable for each other, our planet, other living beings, in all the ways that we do like business. So I would just love to connect with other people on LinkedIn. If you find me, Melissa Miura, Miura. So yeah, I'm always looking to have more authentic connections and conversations and just say hi there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa, for just coming on, sharing sort of your words of wisdom and your strategies. Really appreciate having a chance to talk to you today. So thank you.
No, thanks so much for having me. I wish I had a whole, other hour to ask you all the questions that I wanted to, but That's
You can
another
come
podcast.
back on and we'll continue the conversation, but this has been an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, Melissa, on this episode of Unpack Culture Chronicles. I hope that her reflections on cultural connection, curiosity, and sustainability have sparked new ideas for our listeners on how they might approach their relationships and work. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. And remember, when we lead with curiosity, we foster connection. Until next time, be well.